We know that Somalia has failed to have elections for over a year now.
There is no neglect of that situation. So there's a real effort to make clear to the Somalis that they cannot depend indefinitely on international assistance and that they need to play a role in leading and managing their own country.
Ms. Fee, I wanted to ask, when will the Secretary complete the legal review of atrocity designation in regards to Ethiopia? We've been waiting for months.
As I have discussed here today, our primary focus has been on trying to engage diplomatically in the many ways that are available to us to reach an end to the conflict, which would obviously result in an immediate end of the atrocities. And so we have decided to refrain at the current moment from making a public determination in order to allow space and time to see if the talks that are currently underway can make progress. But I want you to know that we have undergone an active and dynamic determination process. It's ongoing as we continue to assess emerging reports of human rights violations and abuses, and we remain committed to seeing what we can do to address the current elements that have caused all of us such concern. Mm-hmm. We have also engaged Facebook and Twitter. I've spoken here today to ask the diaspora to consider how it discusses the situation. And we are quite concerned as well by hate speech by the government and other elites in Ethiopia. And I think we need to call on everyone to do better to address that situation.
Ilhan Omar thought Molly Fee had cornered on the House floor. Then one bombshell response about the failures of nation-building changed everything. Seriously, it completely deflated a progressive lecture into a blunt lesson on why American taxpayers refuse to be a permanent global ATM. You know, there's an old saying in the heartland, if you're gonna ride a high horse, you better make sure you know how to steer it.
Thank you. There's also increasing reports that the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, China, Iran are arming the Ethiopian government with drones and other weapons. Isn't it time to be pushing for an arms embargo? And in the meantime, shouldn't we be pushing our allies to stop arming Abiy's government?
Absolutely. The issue of arms supplies to Ethiopia is a component of our diplomacy with regional and international allies, and the issue of an arms embargo is one of the many elements of the discussion taking place in New York in the Security Council.
There's also mass migration that is happening in Ethiopia. Millions of people have been displaced. It's contributing to the crisis that's taking place in Sudan. We obviously are seeing many of these migrants enter Libya that are being brutalized. We're also seeing what's happening in Europe as some of them are facing heart conditions as they try to enter the border of some of the European countries. What is the U.S. involvement in trying to mitigate this situation and provide humanitarian assistance?
The subject of Ethiopia has been a subject of immense focus and concern since the Biden-Harris administration took office. In the early months of the administration, they appointed Jeff Feltman as envoy. We continue to be active in Addis with other parties to the conflict who we can reach outside of Addis. As I mentioned before, we're working with the African Union. We're trying to support President Obasanjo. We're working with Kenya and other influential partners in Africa. We're working in the Security Council, at the Human Rights Council. We work with our like-minded partners in Europe. There is a real sustained effort to try and arrest this conflict because of the devastating consequences that you've just described in your intervention.
And I hope those efforts are being handled with the urgency that it deserves. I believe Ethiopia is too big to fail, and it's the possibility of it destabilizing the whole region just breaks my heart. Speaking of the East African region, we know that Somalia has failed to have elections for over a year now. That conflict still is happening. What is the U.S. position on trying to pressure the Somali government to engage in a process that allows for proper elections to take place?
So we agree with you absolutely that the elections are critical, first to complete the parliamentary elections so that the stage is set to move to the presidential elections. That is a component of our engagement with the government, all parties in Somalia, and with all the many regional and international actors who are also active in Somalia, so that there's a unified message. We're also looking now, as you know, the AMISOM mandate is about to expire, and we're looking at how that mandate can be reconfigured to support both the political process and the fight against al-Shabaab. So there is no neglect of that situation. It remains tough to convince the parties to move in the right direction. There has been some progress in the parliamentary elections, but there needs to be more, and it needs to be done more quickly to help Somalia get on a path to self-sufficiency. So that is an area of active discussion, again, with Somali leaders and with our partners in the African Union and in Europe who are financing part of the AMISOM conflict.
And to my colleague's point earlier with the carrot and stick, what mechanisms are we utilizing to make sure that Somalia understands what our position is in regards to this and takes the proper course?
I think one of the lessons that we learned from Afghanistan, that I personally learned and that Secretary Blinken learned, doing more of the same is not necessarily sufficient. So there's a real effort to make clear to the Somalis that they cannot depend indefinitely on international assistance and that they need to play a role in leading and managing their own country. So that is a spirit that is infusing our approach to Somalia.
I certainly agree. And with that, I want to thank both of you for your time.
To really get why this matters, let's look at what's actually happening on the ground in the Horn of Africa. The whole region has been dealing with major instability, mostly driven by a brutal internal conflict in Ethiopia and a mess of an election delay in Somalia. Because of this, millions of people have been displaced, creating a massive migration crisis that pours into neighboring countries and impacts international borders. Now, why should you or I care about this? Because for decades, the standard move in Washington has been to throw endless amounts of American taxpayer money at these complex global issues without asking for a real plan or an exit strategy. When foreign countries become permanently dependent on American aid, it drains our own resources and never actually fixes the root problems. In this hearing, Representative Omar was pushing for immediate, aggressive U.S. intervention, basically acting like Washington can and should micromanage how sovereign nations run themselves. Let's walk through how this actually played out, point by point. Omar started off demanding to know why the State Department hasn't issued a formal public atrocity designation against Ethiopia yet. She wanted a big public statement. But Assistant Secretary Molly Fee didn't take the bait. She laid out some basic reality. The administration is intentionally holding back on a public label to keep the door open for active peace talks. Think about that for a second. A public announcement might sound great for a headline, but in real-world diplomacy, it can easily cause the sides to walk away from the table, which just prolongs the fighting. Wow, it's a perfect example of chasing a good soundbite versus understanding how real negotiations work. Next, Omar shifted to all the foreign weapons flowing into Ethiopia, basically asking why the U.S. hasn't forced an arms embargo yet. Again, Fee had to gently remind her of how the world works. She pointed out that these talks are already happening where they belong, in the UN Security Council with regional allies. You can't just wave a magic wand from Congress and expect other countries to instantly obey.
But the absolute best part of the video was when they started talking about Somalia, which hasn't held its scheduled elections for over a year. Omar asked what tools the U.S. is using to pressure them. This is where Fee dropped the truth bomb. She said a major lesson the State Department learned from the disaster in Afghanistan is that just doing more of the same doesn't work. Wait, what? She explicitly stated that they are telling Somali leaders they cannot depend indefinitely on international assistance and have to step up and run their own country. Honestly, it's wild to hear. At the end of the day, watching an elite politician get a basic lesson on the dangers of endless welfare from their own witness is just beautiful. It turns out that treating international diplomacy like a campus protest doesn't work when the adults in the room actually bring the receipts. I guess Afghanistan taught everyone a lesson about nation building, except, well, the person sitting on the committee. That's all the time we've got today for Congress Showdown. Keep your eyes on the facts, keep demanding accountability, and I'll catch you in the next video.